Do you ever wonder what is intended for or likely to be understood by only a small number? The traditional beliefs, customs, and stories of a community. A community not part of the mainstream, unconventional, peripheral, or extreme. Part of an anthology, a published collection of poems or other pieces of writing. This is Esoteric Lore. I'm your host, Edward Aponte, where I push you to ponder the fringes of folklore. What is imagination? Author and expert in innovation, Phil McKinney, gives us an answer. Most people think of imagination as something that only artists and writers have. But in reality, we all have and use our imagination every day. Whenever we daydream, make plans for the future, or even just remember a memory, we are using our imagination. So why is imagination so important? Well, without imagination, we would be stuck in the present. We would have no hope of ever achieving anything beyond what currently exists. It is imagination that allows us to see the potential for change and progress. And yet, despite its importance, imagination is often in short supply. We can be so bogged down by the day-to-day details of our lives that we forget to dream about what could be. We may be so afraid of failure that we become too risk-averse to try anything new. As a result, our abilities to imagine different possibilities can become stunted. What is the source of our imagination? The subconscious mind is the source of our imagination. It is part of our mind that is not bound by reality or logic. The subconscious mind is constantly taking in information from the environment and our experiences. It then stores this information in the mental unconscious. The mental unconscious is like a vast library where all our memories, thoughts, and feelings are stored. From here, the subconscious mind can access these memories and use them to create new ideas and possibilities. While the conscious mind is focusing on the here and now, the subconscious mind is constantly working in the background, piecing together information and looking for patterns. It is this ability to see connections that allow us to imagine different possibilities. For example, when you have a sudden inspiration of a new invention or a new way to solve a problem, your subconscious mind has been working on the idea for some time, piecing together different bits of information until the solution suddenly pops up into your conscious mind. Thus, the subconscious mind is the spark for our imagination. Have you ever thought to yourself, well, wow, I didn't see that coming? One of the most significant issues affecting society is that individuals cannot conceive of alternatives to the current state of affairs. That's where innovation comes in. In order for society or businesses to make any progress, change, has to be made by innovators and inventors who use their imagination to come up with new ideas and introduce solutions. So while the failure of imagination can be a problem, it is the key to innovation because you cannot make progress without new ideas. And it's been argued that without the capacity for imagination, people would never come up with new ideas. The world is changed by imagination, not by fact. Let me say that one more time and quote Phil McKinney. The world is changed by imagination, not by fact. Let's look at the history of the term failure of imagination. The term failure of imagination was first coined by author William Golden in his 1954 novel Lord of the Flies. In the book, Golden argues that the biggest problem with society is that people cannot imagine alternatives to the way things are currently. He says that this lack of imagination leads to conformism and results in people blindly following the status quo. The term has been used in a variety of contexts since then. Some have used it to describe the failure of politicians to come up with new ideas. Others have used it to criticize the education system for not teaching students how to think creatively. Whatever the context, the term failure of imagination is used to describe a situation where people cannot see beyond the current state of affairs. Let's take a look at some examples of the failure of imagination. On the one hand, there are cases where people have used their imagination to come up with new and innovative ideas. For example, scientists often use their imagination to come up with new theories, ideas. They see things differently and they can imagine possibilities that others cannot. There are also cases when people have failed to use their imagination. This lack of imagination can have negative consequences for both individuals and society as a whole. So let's take a look at some examples. We can use it for both good and bad depending on how imagination is used. Let's take a look at number one, the negative example, the 9/11 attacks. The 9/11 attacks were an example of when there was a failure of imagination. The government could not imagine that someone would fly planes into buildings. And as a result, we did not prepare ourselves for the possibility of such attack. A positive example is the internet. A positive example is where there was a failure of imagination was the internet. The researchers at DARPA, which is a defense and research agency of the federal government, DARPA could not imagine the use of the internet beyond research institutions and government agencies. They never could have imagined how the world would change. Let's prepare ourselves for a failure of imagination. To prepare for a failure of imagination, we need to develop a habit of looking outside the box to come up with new perspectives of the world. By doing so, we can imagine a wide range of possibilities. Number one, think about potential outcomes. So one way to prevent failure of imagination is to think about the potential outcomes of a situation, no matter how unlikely they may. Try to come up with as many scenarios as you can and plan for them accordingly. Number two, be open-minded. Another way to prevent a failure of imagination is to be open-minded. This means be willing to consider new ideas and perspectives, even if they differ from your own. It is important to remember that just because something is different doesn't mean that it is bad. Different can be good. So don't be afraid to step outside of your comfort zone and explore new ideas. 3, encourage others to be creative. Finally, another way to prevent a failure of imagination is to encourage others to be creative. This means creating an environment where people feel comfortable sharing their ideas, no matter how crazy they may seem. It's important to remember that the best ideas often come from those who think outside the box. So don't be afraid to encourage others to be creative and to share their ideas. A key question to ask: what if? What if you could imagine anything and make it happen? What if you could be anyone or do anything? What if questions are a way to spark your imagination and prevent a failure of imagination? They help you explore new possibilities and open your mind to different ways of thinking. By asking what if, you're expanding your knowledge and potential, which can lead to new opportunities and success. What if questions can be used in any situation, whether you face a problem that needs solving or simply looking for a creative way to do something. Asking what if allows you to think outside the box and come up with innovative solutions. It helps us to see things from a different perspective. What if questions are especially helpful when wanting to avoid the surprise that comes from a failure of imagination. Asking what if can help you anticipate negative, positive outcomes and plan for them ahead of time. It's a way to think about all the possible outcomes of a situation and be prepared for anything that might happen. The failure of imagination can be a problem, but it is also key to innovation. We need new ideas in order to make progress, and without the capacity for imagination, we would never come up with new ideas. We need to learn to use our imaginations to understand and plan for both the good and bad. Only then can we truly progress as a society. Healthy imagination is about preparedness. Being prepared for best case scenario or being prepared for the worst case scenario. And pop culture has examples of both. Author Daniel Handler, best known under the pen name Lemony Snicket, gives us an example of worst case scenario and the use of your imagination. In his classic series, A Series of Unfortunate Events. A Series of Unfortunate Events follows a turbulent lives of 3 orphan siblings. These 13 novels reek with the worst case scenario that you can imagine. So you can be a Lemony Snicket and just focus on the negative. Or you can be maybe let's say the rapper Nas in his classic song, If I Ruled the World. Imagine that. So you have 2 extremes. You can focus on being a Lemony Snicket and worst case scenario, a series of unfortunate events, or you can be like Nas and imagine if you ruled the world. Who are you? Are you Lemony Snicket or are you more like Nas? That will determine the health of your imagination. If you like this video, please subscribe, share, and give us a thumbs up. Thanks for watching. See you next time.